So this is a rather unusual video because I'm going to talk about making cuttings because people always like to learn new things or basic things. And I have with me here my cameraman is one of my volunteers, Neto. He is a jiu-jitsu or martial arts master. He has his own business doing that, but he finds bonsai very relaxing. So before I get him to hold the camera, can you tell me something about yourself and what you watch on my channel?
Oh, hi everyone. My name is Neto. So I'm a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu coach and I own a martial arts academy in West London. So I first got involved in and addicted to bonsai during the first lockdown about 3 years ago. And I could not stop watching Mr. Peter's videos, and that's how I get into bonsai world. And I'm here today having the privilege to learn directly from him, which is a dream come true.
But what you say is quite interesting because people come into bonsai from different channels. I remember that the very famous movie, Hollywood movie, Karate Kid.
Exactly.
So many people came into bonsai from that.
That is true. That's also relate. I can also relate that to me.
Is it?
Because,
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
This is where I first actually memory that I have about bonsai is actually with Mr.
Kid.
Miyagi
Okay.
from Karate Kid. And the most, and as far as I can remember, the thing that marked me the most was when he climbed down
The
a
cliff,
rock,
yeah.
the cliff, to collect a bonsai and end up breaking a branch, and that was I never forgot that. And so I can't believe that today I'm
Okay.
actually here.
The way people come into bonsai is very different because some people are gardeners, so they understand gardening. So bonsai comes quite naturally because bonsai is just one step away from gardening. But the number of people who've come from the oriental arts, like the martial arts especially, they have no background of horticulture and yet they become very successful doing bonsai as a hobby. So for those who are watching and have no connection with horticulture, don't be disheartened. It is very simple. As we always say, bonsai is not rocket science. So today's video is going to be about making cuttings, propagating plants to make bonsai, because making cuttings is one of the easiest things to do. So I'm now going to hand the camera over to Neto and he's going to video me doing this. So today I'm going to show you how to make cuttings from different varieties. Let's begin with the Chinese juniper first. These are the Itoigawa stems that I've cut off from big plants rather than throw it away. You've got here, just from one little branch, I've got about 10 possible cuttings. So I'm going to show you how to make what we call heel cuttings. So this is what we call a heel, where we pull it off and that little bit there is called the heel. So with a plant like this, we can make quite a few cuttings. So the ideal thickness of cutting usually should be about the thickness of a toothpick or a matchstick. So with this one, where we've torn it, where we've bruised it, that can become a cutting. So that is called a nodal cutting because we've cut it off at the node and cut the tips so that it don't get too big. Now this piece of wood here, it is rather thick, and usually when it gets too thick, like 8 millimeter, 10 millimeter, it's getting too thick to make bonsai. So the ideal cutting are this size, the size of a matchstick or toothpick. So you clean the bottom, clean the end of the heel. So that is how you make an ideal heel cutting. I don't want to show you masses because I'm going to make lots and lots of cuttings. Usually each tray like this can hold like 100 cuttings. So 100 plants I will be able to get in about 3 months' time. Now, in case you think I'm cheating, let me show you what I did. These are Blaw's Juniper's cuttings. These were made only 6 months ago. I haven't cheated, I haven't looked. I'm going to see what has happened here. And if I take it out, I know they've rooted because they look very healthy and green. And let us see what's happening. Have a look. They've all rooted. Look at that. Look at the beautiful roots. And this is quite a thick cutting I've done. Look at this. This is a thick one. They've all rooted. Oh, good grief. 6 months is not that long to wait. Look at all those roots on this plant. So this is going to be a nice small bonsai if you want to keep it as a small bonsai. If not, I will see there's so much root I have to even cut it off. Look at the roots on that, just one cutting. Look at that beautiful cutting. All that root from that one plant, and there are more. So all these have rooted so well, almost incredible. Look at that one, masses of roots. And this was quite a thick cutting. You see, this is about 6 millimeter. So this has rooted. Look at all these roots on that. These are all cuttings. So you see, it is possible to make cuttings from juniper very easily. And then what I do next is to put it in a pot with compost, and that will become a new plant. In case you think you can't do much with cuttings, look at this one. Now you think that this is an old plant. If you remember my previous video, this is a tanuki. This is a bit of dead wood from the end of a pine tree, and I wrapped a cutting around it to make it look like a aged tree. So this is how I use a cutting to make small tanuki. So don't just say that because they are cuttings you got to wait years before they can become bonsai. They will become bonsai very easily. Now with all that root cutting, I easily take that off and I can pot it into that pot and I will get a new plant from that. So that is how these junipers were made. Now let me show you the actual process of making it. So what do I use to make the cuttings in? I use seed trays. You can use shallow seed trays. Now these junipers were cut from or made from this seed tray. You can use the shallow seed tray. This is a standard type of seed tray you can get from garden center or whatever, and you just fill it with the compost. But I prefer to use these big seed trays. These are very special trays, and the reason why I use these trays is because it's much deeper. If you use a deep tray, it holds more soil and you can push the cutting in deeper, and because it's deep, it generates more heat and you get more surface contact with it. And that is the reason why I prefer to use big seed trays as opposed to using small seed trays. As I say, you don't have to. If you don't have it, it's not the end of the world. You can still use other types of seed tray. But if you can get a deep seed tray or even a flower pot, you can even use an ordinary flower pot like so, and then make cuttings in that. If you don't want too many, just 5 or 6 cuttings. The compost I prepare, have a look. This is a standard type of compost which has got soil in it, soil, bark and fine sand. But I like to open the compost a little more by mixing other types of compost which have pine bark and shredded material. Nowadays, when you go to garden centers and nurseries, you get a type of compost which is really shredded bark or composted leaves. So I will mix the two up. I don't just use it on its own, so I mix the two. You can use it on its own, and as you know, the approach that I give or make in my videos is that there's no harm in experimenting. The more you experiment, you will find what works for you and what doesn't work for you. So there you are. I fill it right to the brim like that, to the top. And then when I come to making the cuttings, I use a hormone rooting powder. Hormone rooting powder is composed of a chemical called IBA, indolyl butyric acid. And I'm giving all my secrets away. You see, this is the brand name, Rhizopon. But you can get any type of hormone rooting powder. Even if you go to garden centers, you can buy very simple, small tube or something of the hormone rooting powder. It's all the same, except that this, we have to buy that container, costs about 70 or 80 pounds because it's very concentrated and only nursery people can buy that. So once I prepared the cutting, even that thick one, I dip the ends in the hormone rooting powder like so. All the ends are dipped, and that helps to quicken the rooting process. If you didn't use it, it will still root, but it will take longer. It'll take much longer to root. And I also give you another tip. When you put it into the soil, I always put it at a slant. not straight in, I put it at a slant. The reason for putting it at a slant is because I get more contact. If you put it like that, it only gets so much contact. But if I put it at a slant, I get more contact with the compost or the soil. So the deeper the contact, the more chance you have of the thing rooting better. So these little tricks all add to the success of making cuttings. Many people complain that they're not successful with cuttings. I don't believe that is so. It is one of the simplest things you can do. I remember when I first started doing gardening seriously about 50 or so years ago, there's always a thrill when you stick something in the soil, when you make a cutting, and lo and behold, after a few weeks or a few months, you get a new plant. How good is that? So you see what I do? I clean the bottom of the stem, and then I stick it in at an angle. As I always remind you, don't be greedy. Don't try and take cuttings which are too thick. This could root, but the chances of rooting a thick branch or a twig is much less than if you did a much thinner cutting. So that I will try as well, because one of the cuttings which was successful was a thick one. But the chances of success are increased if you use thin stems rather than thick stems. Now this is Juniper Itoigawa. Another very easy subject is Hinoki cypress. We use a lot of these for making our bonsai, and again a heel cutting if I make. So this is like a matchstick thing. So that is what we call a heel cutting. So I clean the base, remove some of the bottom branches and stick them in. It's better to keep the same varieties in one tray, then they don't get confused, because different species, they take longer, different lengths of time to root. Like the juniper is the quickest, but Chamaecyparis may take a bit longer. But there's no reason why you can't mix the conifers. I always do conifers together, Juniper and Chamaecyparis. I will come to doing the so-called tropical varieties like ficus in a minute. Ficus is very easy. So again, the heel I've made over there, I clean the heel, dip it in hormone rooting powder and stick it in at a slant. So I will fill the whole tray with juniper and hinoki cuttings. Now when it comes to the ficuses, we're pruning ficuses all the time. And if you get thick branches like that, I never throw them away. Now ficuses, those of you who live in the tropics will know that they are very easy to root. In fact, that video I showed of my visit to India, that Indian bonsai nursery, they were making ficus cuttings that thick, 4 to 6 or 8 inches thick. Just logs of wood put into the soil, and because of the heat in the tropics, they will root in no time. So I was telling you about rooting them in flower pots. You can use a flower pot. You don't have to use hormone rooting powder, but if you use hormone rooting powder, it does speed the process up. Now that is a funny cutting with 2 stems. I will still root that because I'll get a twin trunk tree. Now ficuses, because they're tropical plants, they will root very easily. So I would say in about 4 weeks they should root. And nothing more satisfying than getting small ficus plants that you've created yourself. So I don't even have to make heel cuttings because I know that ficus root easily, so just an ordinary nodal cutting. Now these cuttings were taken about 10 days or so ago. I should have done that straight away, but they were stuck in a bit of water, but they will still root. I don't care if they're crowded, because once they root, I can take them out and pot them up. So what else can you make from cuttings? Okay, I've mentioned root cutting. These are elm roots. If you stick these elm roots in water, they will produce new plants as well. The piceas, the Christmas trees, these also make cuttings very easily. So with those ones, if you just tear, this is how they're all produced commercially. They're all produced from cuttings, not from seed. So again, the ordinary Christmas tree, these are the cuttings you make, and then stick them in soil. So I hope you've learned from this. Very, very easy process, and you will get no end of plants, plentiful supply of plants. So I hope you've learned something from this video.